Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. This is Rapido Live. Today is September the 30th, and tonight we're going to continue to pester Jeff with as many questions as we can to see if we can break his brain. So,
it has happened. So it is possible.
yep.
Yep. Good to be here.
Couple of housekeeping notes thing that I wanted to get out of the way first. Number one, I wanted to say that a very good friend of the show, John Marks, is still having some health issues. He was scheduled to become on the show next week. Unfortunately, he is not going to be able to be on the show, but he did ask that if you are a praying person to keep him in your prayers. Another thing that I would like to do is give a shout out to Avela Imports. And I may have messed that up. My Spanish is not great. It is muy poquito, but they are a new Rapido distributor out in San Bernardino, California. Be sure to look them up at TONIAVILA farm.com. I know they do have it available on their website for sale, and they do sell it there locally in the San Bernardino area. All the information discussed in this interview is intended for historical, entertainment, and educational purposes only. None of this information is intended for any illegal purposes. All opinions are that of the respective individuals and all rights reserved. You got to get that out of the way for Uncle Sam. So, Jeff.
Sure.
Last week, we had a lot of questions.
We did.
And we've got a pretty good bit just left over from last week. And I'm already seeing a lot of stuff come up in the comment section on YouTube and on Facebook. So we're going to do the best that we can, guys, to get to all these questions. First thing that I would like to do is looking in a lot of the groups that I'm in, there's a lot of people that really and truly deep down inside feel like oyster shells is grit. Can we talk for a few minutes about the difference in grit or limestone and oyster shells or calcium carbonate?
Yeah, we can. And it's easy to understand why, whether it's calcium chips, it's oyster shells, because it's big and gritty.
Mm-hmm.
And if you hold it in your hand, to you and I, it feels hard or firm or like it's going to last. And in all actuality, there's plenty of studies to prove this, that oyster shell actually is only in a chicken system for 24 hours. Okay. And the whole point behind the oyster shell is so the hens have slow dissolved calcium through the night when they're on the roost or when they're sleeping. And with that slow dissolving calcium in their digestive tract, mostly in their lower gut and intestinal tract, we get a better quality eggshell.
Right.
Oyster shell is not going to stay in there for more than that 24-hour period. Okay. It's going to be gone by the following day when that bird eats the next round. Now, is every piece of oyster shell gone? No, but it's not going to hang around in the gizzard. So whereas granite grit is going to stay in the gizzard where you want it. The only place you want grit or the only place you want stone is in the gizzard. And it's going to stay in the gizzard for days, weeks. If a bird has enough, and I've opened up enough gizzards, and I bet you that the majority of guys listening tonight haven't, but I've opened up hundreds of gizzards because I really want to know what's in there. And the ones that are being fed grit, the contents of the gizzard by sight, not by weight, is 50%. It's half stones. Okay. So I'd challenge anybody listening. Look, next time a bird dies by accident or however you wring its neck, whatever, just take a minute, pull the gizzard out, split it open, send me the picture. And if you're not feeding grit, there's not going to be 50% granite in there. But I said, it lasts a long time. There's probably, on a mature bird, if I weighed it, and now I need to do this just so I know, but if I weigh it out, I'll bet you there's probably 1.5 ounces of grit in the gizzard of stone. And if I weighed it out, it's when they have access to it, right? If they don't have access to it, then of course it ain't going to be there. But
So with that, the grit, that's what breaks up those pellets that are rock hard and the pieces of corn.
more
And
so
so-
the corn, the
Yeah.
corn, when the pellet gets wet, once a pellet gets wet and it soaks down, like in
Yeah.
the crop, by the time it leaves the crop, those pellets should be pretty well broken up.
Mushy.
Yeah. And I like larger particle stuff. And people think pellets are larger particle, but really they're powder that's been
Yeah.
pressed into a pellet. And within a couple hours of coming in contact with moisture, water, gut juices, they start falling apart. But I want that gizzard to work hard. I want that gizzard working all the time. And I can't prove this. I'm not going to, this is just my way of thinking, but I think the more the gizzard works, the harder the gizzard works, the stronger that chicken is. To me, the gizzard is the core strength of that chicken. So
Mhm.
I want it. Yeah. I want that gizzard working all the time, and I want it working hard.
So Michael says that he's seen a study with laying chickens and they really aren't, they're not a lot different than game fowl. But the studies show that whole corn can stay in the system for a week or so. He can't remember the exact number of days.
It can if there's no grit, because it's got to sit there. It's got to sit there and soak and, slowly dissolve. There's really no stomach acids. Okay. So until something leaves the gizzard, so from the crop down the trachea to the gizzard, right? There's no real bacteria, or there's no enzymes. There's no digestive function. Okay. At that point, it's just getting it to the grinder, right?
Yeah.
And the bird breaks it up. And when it's small enough, it'll slip out. It slips into the intestinal tract or the gut. And that's where all your live bacterias, all your enzymes, all your digestive juices are doing their work. There's very little in the gizzard. The gizzard is solely for grinding. So there's not, and I don't want to say there's no digestion going on. There is, because it's breaking it up and it's making it into smaller particles. And that's part of digestion. But the true digestion and absorption is going to happen after the gizzard. Okay. So the better we get it ground up and the smaller that particle size is leaving the gizzard going into the gut and the intestines, the more the bird's going to get out of it. In the studies I've seen, we've seen a 7 to 10% reduction in overall feed required by a chicken when it gets grit.
And that leads me to another question that came up, and I see this a lot. What is the most common cause of sour crop? What is a way to possibly prevent it and get your bird better?
All right. Sour crop is most of the time, and I'm never going to say it's always, but most of the time, sour crop is actually a yeast infection, a negative yeast infection in the crop. And usually gets blocked by something with too much fiber. It ate something too big to soak and digest, or when you turn them loose on grass that's too big. Most of the time I'm seeing it on the grass where they eat really big blades of grass, really big pieces of grass, and they just can't get it to pass. Then everything gets bunched up there, and the yeast, and believe it or not, whether you have probiotics added or not, the grains coming in out of the field these days have a term that we call wild yeast. So there's a naturally occurring yeast. There's many naturally occurring yeast cells out in nature, but we're finding these are coming in at harvest time with the grains, and the spores are already on the grains coming in. And so those yeast will get activated by moisture, and that's triggering sour crop. And if we don't get that crop flush and get things moving, I actually had one lady who did surgery on the bird, right? Clipped back the feathers, got the feathers out of the way, went in there with a surgical scalpel, opened up the skin, opened up the crop, emptied the contents, flushed it all out, and then gently sutured that bird back up. And the bird's still alive today. Bird's doing fine. You got to love a chicken if you're going to do surgery on it like that. But
that was the last survivor of their bloodline, and they needed some more eggs. They needed some more eggs.
Yeah.
Let's see. Victor asked, is there any benefit when feed soaked oats? And does it matter what type of oat you use?
Look, okay. I'm not gonna put down soaked oats only because I haven't tried it. But if I was gonna soak oats, I would only do it for about 24 hours. I don't know that I really want the whole fermentation going on back to the wild yeast and things like that may get out of control. Okay. So I'm not opposed to soaked oats. I haven't seen the need for soaked oats yet. Okay. I'm leaving that door open. I'm learning new stuff every day.
Yeah.
For mature birds, I really prefer the whole oats, and they can be dry. In everything I recommend, they're just dry whole oats. And I need to find the article again, but there's some really old data, like 100-year-old or 60-year-old data that showed that the oat hull, after it breaks up, right? After it breaks up in the gizzard, when you got grit, the actual oat hull, the outer oat hull, as it passes through, it doesn't digest. And as it passes through the gut and the intestinal wall, it's a natural irritant to internal parasites. Like those little shards of oat hull are poking and prodding, and they're really pissing off the internal worms. So I like the whole oats with the hull on them. That's my preference. And also it makes that gizzard work harder. Again, back to keeping that gizzard moving. The more that gizzard contracts and releases and does its job, I think the bird is healthier.
I agree. Dwayne says, hey, Dwayne, I saw your videos that you posted about your rooster that was about 30 feet up in the air in a tree holding on for dear life. That's definitely a keeper right there. He said that he has found broken glass pieces inside the gizzard with no sharp edges left.
Yes, sir.
There's a man that's definitely feeding some grit.
Yeah. Or that bird's getting stones for sure, but
somehow
the unusual things that we've seen in gizzards, the list is long.
Yeah.
I saw there was a roofing repair job in Illinois, and the guys dropped a box of sheet metal screws when they were hanging the roof, and they didn't get them all. And when the pullets came in the barn, they saw those shiny screws, and they were all like
they went crazy.
3/8. Yeah, they cleaned them right up. And I've got pictures of a turkey gizzard with a 20-penny nail that it grew around it. The nail punctured the gizzard because the gizzard kept working. There's a 20-penny nail sticking out of a turkey gizzard. I've seen turkeys pick up 22 rimfire bullets. Yeah. So they will find something hard to go to fill that gizzard and grind feed. There's no doubt about it.
So we used to have an above ground pool, and with that you put 6-8 inches, whatever, of sand. And my mind says, hey, sand mix a little peat moss. That's a good spot to put a grow out pen. So I put a 10 by 20 grow out pen on top of that. And I mean, these birds are in there for a few months, and then I go in there and I start seeing chunks of glass, all kinds of crap. And I'm like, where in the heck did this come from? But those birds, they're natural scavengers, and man, they were digging all in the dirt. You just about can't see a whole lot of the sand now because they've mixed so much of the dirt that was up under it in with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Victor wants to know, is the Tractor Supply grit correct grit? Is it the correct grit to use?
I don't know. I haven't been to Tractor Supply, so I don't really know. Mature birds should be getting what we call layer grit. And if you're using cherry stone, I think it's number 3. And pretty much all you need is grower grit and layer grit is the 2 different sizes. Yeah. If Victor sends me a picture of the bag, I can tell him. But
Well, I was going to
don't know.
say, I like to go there on occasion just to walk around because I have one really close to the house. And some of the grit that they have is more of a reddish type. And Victor, I will tell you that my birds, I don't know if it's because they're bougie or what, but they don't really like the red grit. So what I've started doing is ordering Vermont grit online, and I can get it with free shipping, and it comes in. It's like a gray, silverish type color. It's real bright, and they use it a lot more than they would use the red when I was getting it. Sometimes you will see the lighter color grit, the limestone grit at Tractor Supply, but it's a color thing for them. So there's that. Let's see. The Tractor Supply grit is crushed, Dwayne says. Most of the grit that they have there is for chicks because they sell a ridiculous amount of chicks.
Yeah. The only thing I've ever seen is the little bag of Mana Pro, the 5-pound bag of Mana Pro chick grit or pigeon grit.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I've ever seen there. But I've heard stories that some Tractor Supplies have started carrying bigger bags, 50-pound bags of crushed granite.
So the one in this closest to my house don't, but I have one that's about 30 minutes away that they do carry the crushed granite. Here's our buddy from Guam. Says, if my last feeding is 5 p.m. on Friday, how many hours would it take for my bird's gizzard to be empty? And that's a loaded question because
it is. And
it depends on what you're feeding.
I was just going to say, I don't know everything in his feeding program. I pretty much count on empty at about 14 hours. It can be as early as 12, and I have seen it as late as 16, depending on how much fiber is in there. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that factor into getting a bird truly empty, but I would say 12 to 14 hours is probably right.
Yeah.
They're probably not getting a whole lot of water in that time frame from 5 p.m. for the next 12 hours, so it could be a lot slower. There's not a perfect answer to that without knowing the amount of fiber in the diet and everything else that's going into it. It's got to have moisture to flush. And if we're restricting moisture at that point, it could hold on a little longer. I've seen 12, the earliest I've seen is 12 hours to a flush, and I've seen 16 and 18 hours to get it out of there.
Now, Jeff, he says that he uses your formula.
Okay. It should be 12 to 14 hours.
Okay. That's one of Jin's students.
Yeah.
Good. All right.
He's a good one too.
Yeah, he is. I like him. He's a really nice guy. Another question that I've seen that's come across a couple of times is, should I get rid of worm pills that are expired?
I don't know that they really expire. Okay. So the FDA, USDA, the FDA, and all those governing agents require the drug companies, they require an expiration date, and they won't let it go more than 2 years. Okay. The longest you can put an expiration date is 2 years. But to my knowledge, the active ingredients in wormers does not truly have a shelf life. It'll last, I would say, probably more like 4 years at least. Okay. It doesn't, as long as you kept it dry, out of the sun, you keep it dry in its packaging. Yeah, it's going to be good for probably close to 4 years or 5.
Maybe even stick it in the freezer.
Yeah, but people need to know that expiration dates are made up, in a lot of cases, are a made up number that have been forced by Food and Drug Administration.
I've been doing a lot of research lately about freeze drying stuff. And if you sell freeze dried candy or anything, you got to comply with your local laws, and most of them require expiration date within 2 years, like you said.
Yep.
But when you look at freeze drying from a prepping standpoint, people are talking about, I do this to make it last 20 to 25 years. So,
Yep.
I don't really trust them.
Again, okay, the only way you can have, this is my knowledge, okay? I can't show you the proof of it, but my knowledge of FDA guidelines are the maximum shelf life is 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The only way you can get a longer shelf life or a longer expiration date is you have to prove it to them through repeated studies, have it tested by a third party lab that the active ingredients or the quality has not deteriorated more than, I think, 10%. Okay. So it's crazy. And just,
It's a lot of money. Dwayne has a question here. He says, what is the best treatment for mud fever?
okay, so let's understand what mud fever is doing, right? And the reason the bird is picking up dirt and putting it in their water is they're trying to soothe either their gut or their intestinal tract. So they've got something irritating their intestinal tract. And clay particles, or mud in this case, are excellent soothers for this. And they'll get like mycotoxins or other things out of the system. So I actually tell people to buy a product which is a calcium bentonite clay called Redmond clay. And Redmond clay is really clean, food grade, purified, whatever. And I can put 1 to 2 tablespoons in a gallon of drinking water, shake it up, mix it up really good, and use that to serve it. And the birds will straighten up. Usually, for most people, the birds will straighten up within 3 or 4 days, and they'll quit doing it on their own. The only reason I use that particular clay is I know its purity level and how clean it is. So
Yeah.
I know that there's no foreign bacteria. I know that there's no strange stuff. It's actually a volcanic ash product, and it's really clean. So but it's a calcium bentonite clay powder. There's a lot of them on the market. You can probably find something local.
All right. I had one that was posted on Facebook a while ago. It says, I've been backyard breeder for a while, and I live in a small town with bigger towns all around. Been buying the same brand of feed from a local mill. Over the years, I've noticed a change. I was buying 15% with whole corn in the summertime, with 18% with cracked corn in the wintertime. Over the last few years, they changed to where both are whole corn, and it's about $1.50 more for the 18th. I just get that now. And the feeding direction, it says feed free choice to mature game fowl, add supplements if needed. Been trying to find the old tag to see what it is. With the economy getting ridiculous, prices getting higher, quality getting worse, what should I do?
Yeah, actually, if the price of that feed only went up $1.50 in the last year or so, they've already cut a bunch of corners, right? So they've taken something out of it. And vitamin prices have gone up. Feed prices have gone up roughly 20%. So a $20 bag of feed's gone up $24. If they didn't water it down and they didn't reduce their quality, feed prices have gone up over the last year and a half about 20%. A lot of these guys are scrambling. They're using more byproducts. They're using more wheat middlings. They're using more corn distillers. They're trying to keep the price down because they know too many guys are shopping based on price. I see 2 feeds on the shelf. One's 20, one's 25. Unless they know there's a significant difference, they're going to buy the $20 feed. So, the feed mill people know this. and they want to keep selling you feed. So we've forced them into this corner is what I'm saying. The person who manufactures and sells things into the livestock community and poultry community, I get this pressure every day. Oh man, why does stuff cost too much? Oh, I better go check your competition, see what they got. And I hear this shit. I'm like, but
It is what it is.
I'm a hard ass. I'm not changing my formula because you're cheap, right? My shit's going to stay the same. Okay. You go try somebody else's, you'll be back. Okay. And then that's just the truth of it.
We're not changing a recipe to make it cheap, and we're not adding preservatives.
That ain't happening. That ain't happening. I'm just not going to dilute it down. I can explain to you why my stuff costs more, right? And I can show you on the tag. I can show you in the formula. I can explain to you exactly why it costs more. But I never have to hear you. You can come say you're too expensive, but you never are going to come back to me and say your product failed. I never have to live with that my product failed. So,
and that's one thing that I've noticed since, like, I've been studying poultry nutrition quite a bit for the last while. And I've got to where I can look at a feed tag and tell by the ingredients, I can be within $1 of what it cost, because a lot of the stuff they put in there to keep it cheap. Because not everybody wants to pay $28, $30 for a bag of feed, but it is what it is. This question, I've had a lot of people ask, and I can't think of a better person than the guy that wrote the formula. What in the world is Rapido made out of?
All right. So Rapido is, and we're going to talk about quality now. Okay. It's just what we just came from. So you went to the next best question. Rapido starts out with a very select, unique sourdine fish meal that I get from a family-owned fish processor in Guaymas, Mexico. The name of the company is Guaymas Protein.
Beautiful place, by the way.
Yeah. And Carlos, the owner, is an outstanding guy. Okay. Starts with that, right? I'm putting kelp meal into that. I'm putting really high vitamins into that. I'm adding the lysine, the methionine, the probiotics. So there's no room, actually, and you and I have talked about this. There's no room in the Rapido to do anything different, right? It is full, and it's only full of essentials, right? There's not a single byproduct in there, in that bag. And I'm worried guys are leaving the bag open and humidity's getting into it, because I've had a couple guys actually got their Rapido wet, and that fish meal will start to rot quickly because I don't believe in these really heavy, harsh preservatives. So I'm not going to put them in there. That's what's in there. It's fish meal, some kelp meal, vitamins, amino acids, probiotics. That's the long and the short of it. There's trace minerals in there as well. There's a little bit of zinc, copper, manganese, iron, and the Rapido has vitamin K. We did put vitamin K in there specifically for the game fowl community.
You're going to have to read this one, because it says what's ectotoxin?
Ectotoxin
that
is an antioxidant or a preservative. Yep, that is the preservative. And they've quit using that in the high-end dog foods, and they've taken it out of anything related to horses, because they've linked skin disorders and metabolic problems with ethoxyquin. But yet the FDA and the USDA still allow those SOBs to use that shit. If I see anything with ethoxyquin, I just run the other direction. I don't want anything to do with it. Okay.
Yeah. And guys, I'll say this. If you dive off and start studying poultry nutrition, you're going to learn a lot about what that feed tag says. And you're really going to start questioning the food that you eat yourself. And you're going to understand a lot of why your body does the way it does too. Now, here's a question for us. Coccidiosis has been a headache of mine. He's in Guam. And what can I do to prevention and treatment? Please advise. Had one shrink to skin and bones, but it would eat a lot. Wormed him, gave him some sulfa stuff from the Philippines, but no luck. Buttermilk.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if Alana Joy's tried the milk or the buttermilk. I've had really great luck using milk. And you just offer them what they'll clean up in about an hour. Okay. Just whole milk. Don't overthink it. Doesn't have to be raw. Doesn't have to be goat, but it can be, but I just need whole milk. And usually you have to run that about 5 to 7 days. You can also use it with your chicks as a prevention.
Mhm.
And it works as good as anything I've seen. It just
Like
takes a little bit more work.
for me personally, when I had chow chick, which I don't drink whole milk. Me, it's not good. I like that watered down stuff, but I'll get the whole milk for my chickens. And day 1, 3, 5, and 7, I'm giving them some milk in the brooder. I've got some small waters that I put so I can space them out when I'm hatching my chicks. And one of them has milk in it. And I do that every other day for the first week. And I don't put food on the ground of any kind. And I keep my brooders clean. You turn me on to peat moss, and that's been a game changer. I'll put a couple inches of peat moss. I can brood birds, even Cornish, for 2.5, 3 weeks on 2 inches peat moss. And then I take that peat moss and I pile it up. And then when it's time to plant a garden, I have some really good dirt for my garden.
Yeah, he's not going to get peat moss in Guam.
Yeah, he's not getting that in Guam.
But the next best alternative would be a ground coconut core. So there probably is easy access to ground up coconut core.
Yeah.
Because we're using more and more coconut core here as a peat moss replacement in potting soils.
I was going to
That
say,
could
he could
be.
probably go to a lawn and garden place and find some, right?
Yeah, I would think so. But yeah, not peat moss. The price of peat moss in Guam would be astronomical. So that's not going to work.
Yeah. Alan McGee says, and I love this, cheap rooster, cheap feed cost the most when you need to count on them.
Amen. 100%. You can't get out more than you put in.
I pay $50 for 50 kilos here in the Philippines, but it's Jeff's best formula. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I know where he's getting it. And he's got it. He's
Yeah.
been feeding that now over 6 months, probably coming up close to a year. And he hasn't told me it didn't work. And he didn't tell me it was a bag of shit. And Peter would. I know Peter. Peter would tell me.
Yeah, and he says he keeps doing it, so
Yeah.
he's not going to keep paying $50 for a bag of shit either.
No.
Do you stop feeding them when you give them the milk, or do you mix it with their feed? Personally, I do not mix it with their feed. It goes in there. They'll drink it or they'll drink water.
Yeah, it's a free choice thing. I like to put it in its own either pan or drinker or bowl or something like that. And like I said, whatever the group will clean up in an hour and a half. And you're not really going to overdo it, but you don't need to do it every day. You only do it every day when you're treating coccidiosis or necrotic enteritis. When you're using it as a prevention, like Carrie said, I usually tell people day 3, day 7, day 14, day 21, day 28. Okay. And that gets you up to 4 weeks of age. And they should have their own immunity to it by that age.
Peter says, nope, I'm winning.
Yep.
So he's going to keep paying it.
Yep.
50%, 80% off lock, 20% 5-way, and Rapido. His roosters feel great. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Let's see. I got another question. While we're talking about feed, we talked about this briefly last week about observable differences that you can expect when you switch to a better feed. Touch on some of those again for us.
All right. So when you know you've got it right, okay, and you're feeding them really good, usually at about 10 days to 2 weeks, 10 to 14 days, you see their personality change or their disposition change. They're a little more alert. They're a little bit more energetic, but at the same time, they're more satisfied, right? And One of the ways I know when a bird's being fed right is when I come up to the pen. Do they come up out of curiosity to see who I am and what I'm doing? Or are they trying to run away from me? Okay. And when I find a bird that's doing its damnedest to get away from me, then I know that there's something not right. Okay. Either the bird's been mishandled, abused, or that the feed they've been on has been wrong for a long time. Look, I'm going to see them. Yeah, they're going to be more alert and they're also going to be more active, but they're not going to be afraid of you, right? They're looking for you to come to the pen, right? They're looking for that feed. And I can't tell you how many guys have told me when they started feeding Rapido with whatever they buy in local, if they ran out and they didn't put the Rapido in the feed, the birds would look up at them like, you want me to eat this shit? And there's no, without the Rapido? So they just give them the look like, hey man, where's the good stuff? So it was funny. Early on in the early Rapido days, I'd get those calls. So
They know that if it's got that oil on it, they know what's in it.
they can smell the fish meal, right?
Yep.
So they know this fish meal's in there. They can see and smell the oil. They know if the good stuff's in there or not. And they're smarter than we give them credit for sometimes.
While we're talking about feed, let's talk about so people can take some notes. When they're looking at that feed tag, what should they be looking for?
Everybody's looking at the guaranteed analysis, and everybody gets all hung up on the protein.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it, right? And protein's important, but more important is those amino acid levels, right? And a lot of the guys have already heard me say this, but when I'm looking at a tag, I see guys feeding like a 22% protein and they think that's right when it's not really right. Okay. The bird, I got a good friend of mine in Eastern Kentucky and he's feeding a 16%, but we got the lysine up above 1%. We're running at 1.1, 1.2 lysine, and we're running the methionine at close to 0.5, and we're running the threonine at 0.75 to 0.8, right? And the bird's bodies, performance, and everything, they act like they're feeding a 20%, okay? Simply because we got the amino acids right. Okay. It's not, all right, folks, listen, it takes 3 or more amino acids to make one protein. Okay. So amino acids make proteins. They form proteins. So the more correct the amino acids are, the less actual protein the bird needs. And it's not just you're eating it out or manuring it out the back end, right? It's getting more out of what it's eating. And that's what we want. Okay. So you got to focus more on those amino acids. So at least a 1% lysine minimum, at least a 0.45 methionine minimum. And most tags don't even tell you, a lot of tags don't even tell you that. I'm looking for a fiber at 5. I want a fat at 5 or higher. 5 to 7 fat is where you want to be. Then I go down into the ingredients and I hate a tag that says grain products, grain protein products, processed grain byproducts, things like that. So you have no idea what's in that feed. Okay?
Yeah.
Not
What grain?
They can change. It can change from day to day. So if they get a cheap buy on barley, they're taking out the corn. If they get cheaper corn, they're taking out the oats. If they get cheaper, they're trying to save money and they're trying to make this least cost formulation. So I would definitely go with a feed tag that says corn, soybeans, wheat, something that if it's basically like a full disclosure. And there's not a lot of feed mills out there doing this. Not that I want to promote Kalmbach, but I have to give them kudos that at least they're putting their ingredients on their label. Do I trust them 100%? I don't know, but at least they are giving you like a full disclosure of what's in there. So
Peter says a true test, if you got really good feed from day one, is when people visit your yard and they always want to know how you got such beautiful bodies on your stags and on your pullets. And he said, you got to start from day one with quality.
Yep. And I think a lot of guys are missing that. Peter brings up an excellent point. Okay. If you want the best muscle development, especially up in the breast and the legs and the thigh, that occurs in the first, you're setting the pattern for the muscle in the major parts of that body in the first 2 weeks of life. So if you're feeding a crappy, cheap chick starter, you've already set them back, right? They are never going to be what you want them to be. The most important and the most expensive feed you should ever buy is your chick starter. And I don't care if you have to buy somebody's foo-foo organic off of a Chewy and get it shipped in for $100 a bag. That starter feed is the most important feed you will ever feed your chicken. And if you screw that up, I can't fix it. Ain't nobody out there going to fix that. Okay.
Listen, so, but now that we've been using it, we've won a whole lot more derbies. The way we used it to do it was buy the product and put it in pills ourselves, because there's no pill from back then when we first started buying it. Mentioning that, there's some people that have orders for Rapido Red that have been dangling for the past week. The stuff is made and those orders will go out this week. I had no clue that people wanted that as bad as I've seen that they wanted it, but they do, and it's coming. Let's see. Mine has grain product, plant protein product, processed grain byproduct, animal meat, animal protein product, forage product, then goes with all the additives.
Yeah.
So it's very generic.
Okay.
And then
the one plus that Michael's feed has, it does have an animal protein in it. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. He got points with me. At least it has an animal protein, because I've never met a vegetarian chicken in my life. Okay. And if anybody tells you they got a vegetarian chicken, they're lying.
Yeah, they're definitely lying.
They're lying. There ain't a vegetarian chicken anywhere.
Let's see. Dwayne says, I feed a 22% meat bird starter.
That's fine. I just would like to see the amino acid levels on it. I'm not questioning. Dwayne knows what he's doing. I'm only here to help guys. I'd love to pick that tag apart and see what it's missing.
And I was going to say,
overfeeding protein and not.
I would only do that high a protein for a month?
Yeah, 4 to 5 weeks.
4 to 5 weeks. I will say, if it's the start to finish meat bird formula that I've seen that's pretty popular, if you add in the Rapido like you should, your amino acids will be where they should be. It does boost them up a little.
Yeah, he said he's adding the Rapido to it, so he's mixing in the Rapido.
Yep, that's perfect.
It's definitely helping him. So,
Doug says, is Purina Chick Starter with Rapido a good feed?
Yeah, Doug needs to send me the tag. I'm not sure. Not all of Purina's Chick Starters are the same. It should be. I don't think it's going to be a problem. And I work close with Doug, so I think we're fine. And I think I have looked at it in the past. So I just want to make sure that it's fresh. So we need to watch the dates on that. So
now I can say if it's the Purina Flock Razor, I do have a database that's got a lot of these in it. The protein is at 20%, the fat's at 3.5%. The vitamin A falls right at 7,000 IUs, which is great. It does not have vitamin D in it, which is unfortunate. Vitamin E is at 14 instead of more like 50 to 100. It does have 1.1% lysine and 0.55 methionine, but it don't have threonine in it at all.
They don't guarantee it, right?
Yeah.
There would be whatever's coming with the soybean meal and the natural proteins, but
right,
We don't have a way to identify it. He's putting the Rapido in there, so he's definitely hitting his numbers.
It should be good.
The bird should look good, especially if he's using the oil with the Rapido to get the fat level up above 5.
Let's see, places like Guam are limited to feeds available, but when you add the Rapido to the program, it greatly improves it.
Yeah, the guys in Guam really have it tough. The guys here in the States think they have it tough finding feed. Yeah, go to Guam.
Yeah, go to Guam.
Or go to the Philippines. Your choices are really poor.
Is it possible to optimize a 1-year-old stag's muscles that's been fed poor quality feed, then change to high quality?
It's really tough. Lucas, it's really tough. And nobody wants to do it. To do this, we're talking about, and this is not perfect, but this is where pulling them down body weight wise, like a mole, we should have done it through the mole, but you pull them down and you strip out the fat and you come back in there with a really precise amino acid diet, and it'll be better. It will be better. Okay. It's never going to be perfect. I can't get it back to perfect.
What do you think about giving chicks turkey starter? The protein is 30%. Is that too much protein? Yes.
Yeah.
You might could get away with it if you do it for less than a week.
Yeah.
But
I could probably do 2, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't go past 2 weeks. Yeah. For sure. You don't want to go more than 2 weeks on that.
But I think the reason that he says that is because if you look at a lot of turkey starter, the amino acids are there. They're there. The protein is a little high, but if you're doing that for a couple of weeks, then you'll be all right.
Yep.
Fed a starter Jeff formulated this year for the first time. If you can get it, I definitely recommend it. I know somebody that'll ship it to you. Gallo Supremo and the Jitter Juice has been good testing the stuff on the stag. That is great to hear.
Good feedback. Yeah. We've been waiting to hear some feedback on that. So that's good. Yeah. Good deal.
And Dwayne says, give him a boiled egg. That is never a bad plan.
No, just crush it up. Not too much. Don't get crazy with the boiled eggs, guys. Okay. The first week, you're only talking about 1 hard boiled egg or 2 for 25 chicks. As they get bigger, you can gradually increase it. But I don't want egg laying around out there for more than 3-4 hours. And then, you're just opening yourself up for things you don't want.
All right, we've got time just for a couple more. One that I've actually had submitted 3 times, so I want to make sure I get it asked as well. Does activated charcoal work on diseases in younger birds, older birds, both, or yes in general? And how would you go about doing that?
All right, let's back up just a second. And I don't want to burn up all of our remaining time, but activated charcoal is solely designed, its sole purpose is to bind toxins and poisons. Okay. That's why you go to the hospital, if somebody swallows poison, you go to the emergency room, they're going to give you activated charcoal because it absorbs all that stuff. It does nothing that I'm aware of for bacterial or viral diseases. Okay. It's only going to bind up toxins, bad things, poisons that are in the digestive tract. Okay. It's not, I hear these anecdotal stories, old wives' tales a lot that charcoal or humates or these things will work against bacterias and viruses. But no, it goes in there and it acts like a sponge and it attracts and absorbs poisons in the digestive tract. It's really what it's doing. Okay. So you use it for a digestive upset. You use it if you think the birds are poisoned from something, but it's not going to work against bacterial or viral infections. So I wouldn't count on it.
With tie cords and the 4x4 pins for living space, with good quality feed and the muscles stay optimized.
You need to rotate them from the tie cords to the pens pretty frequently. to keep the muscle tone up. And then you should be alternating the cord from leg to leg so that you have a balance on, so that the muscle is balanced on both legs. You don't want to stay on one leg too long. The longest I would go is 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks in the pen, 2 weeks on the cord. You can go longer on the cord. You're going to get better muscle in the cord than you are the pen. But I think it's important to rotate them as much as you can. Get them out of those pens. The pens don't give you the muscle.
Yeah, you're not getting it out of there. I like a 6-foot tie cord.
Yeah.
And for me, like, I take care of and I spend time with my birds every day. But I do my chicken chores on the weekend. And every weekend, one of those chicken chores is swapping the leg. That way I handle my bird, see how their body feels, see how they're doing, check them out, make sure they look good. And while I've got them in my hand, I'll take it off one leg, put it on the other, drop. Well, all the birds that go from left to right, then right to left every week.
I like to see it done weekly. Like I said, I wouldn't go longer than 2.
Yeah. Let's see. Doug says that he's been giving his stags all flock free choice in feeders soaked with and soaked oats and scratch with Rapido added. And they're some of the healthiest and best looking in 47 years.
Yeah. I've been working with Doug for probably close to 3 years now.
I was going to say,
he's still a diehard for the soaked oats. He is. He's been doing it 47 years, so he's still going to use the soaked oats no matter what I tell him, and that's fun. But
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
But yeah, we've been working on his formula for a while now. So,
all right, guys, we're at our time. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I enjoyed it. Lots of good questions. Stay tuned. We may have a surprise for you next week. In the meantime, I will see y'all in the comments.
Thank you.